Hello there, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I'm here with you on a Sunday afternoon. I'm so happy to be here with you, and I'm hoping that whatever is going on with you today, that you're able to meet the day and meet each moment as you experience it with an openness, with an acceptance, and with kindness and compassion in your heart and in your intention. I really hope that for you. And if that's not true for you, then I would like to tell you about some practices that you could do to make that true. But today I wanted to talk about something kind of really specific. I hope that's okay with you. So you wouldn't know it to look at me today. In fact, most people that I tell this to, they literally don't believe me. But the reality is that I used to be a very angry person. I know I've told you all this before, so it might not be news for most of you hearing this. But it's important to recognize. It's important because of the reason. Now, when I was a very angry person, right? And when I say that I used to be a very angry person, I do mean it in that sense that I was anger. Like that was my identity. It was literally all day, every day that anger was ready to erupt. You know, that I lived in a constant state of anger that was either just very outwardly directed or just, simmering beneath the surface. That was my entire existence. Now, of course, there's something to be said about that, right? That I was actually practicing anger all that time. And I understand that now. And I understand that that was, one of the reasons why I became so angry all the time. But I understand something even more important about this now that I never understood back then, and that's what I want to talk to you today about, is that the anger that I used to feel, and when I say that I used to feel anger, like I used to get hijacked by my anger, like all the time. I made horrible decisions in my life. I created real discord and harm through my anger. And that's something that I have to, that I look back on with remorse and I work to forgive myself for that. And that's a huge part of the work in and of itself, right? But what I've come to understand about all this anger that I used to feel is that it all arose from a very simple delusion, right? And the delusion was that there's a separation between me and everyone else who I'd come into contact with. That somehow there was an intrinsic difference between who I am and what I'm all about and who you are and what you're all about. That there was somehow an intrinsic difference. And the reality is that there's not. Right now there is a spiritual concept and a spiritual understanding of what we call interbeing, right, or interconnection, right, in the sense that we are all very much connected to one another. Right. And I subscribe to that belief now. Right. I didn't all the time. Right. But I do subscribe to that in a cognitive and spiritual understanding of the world. Okay. Now, but the thing is that you don't have to believe that in order to still understand what I'm talking about, because there is also a very scientific basis to what we're talking about here. Right. There's a scientific basis to the fact that we are not separate, that we are very much connected with one another. And I'd like to give you a couple of those scientific bases right now, okay? Number one, in the discovery of mirror neurons. Right, and I've talked to you about mirror neurons here before. Mirror neurons are the neurons in our brains, clusters of neurons in our brains that literally are feeling what we perceive someone else feeling. Like, not in the sense of, oh, I can imagine what that soda tastes like that person's drinking, and specifically this came from a discovery in a lab with monkeys where the lab technician was eating an ice cream cone. And the monkey on the other side of the glass, his brain reacted as though he were eating an ice cream cone. Okay, and this led to the discovery, as I said, what we call mirror neurons. Actually, Dan Siegel, who's renowned neuroscientist and sort of the creator of what he calls interpersonal neurobiology, the discipline of science called interpersonal neurobiology, he's really the pioneer of that. he calls these mirror neurons, he calls them sponge neurons, because what we're really doing is we're absorbing the experience of another. But either way you want to look at it, this is clear evidence that there's a connection happening between us. Now, this isn't the only one, of course, right? There's also empathic resonance that you feel in your body, not just your brain neurons, but in your body, you feel what I feel. This is not woo. This is neuroscience. But maybe the most important part of this scientifically that I wanted to talk to you about today is, and the neuroscientist Richard Davidson talks a lot about this. He's got several talks on how, where this is in the context of well-being is a skill, right? Which it is. Like, you have the capability of training yourself so that you can have higher levels of well-being. And so do I, and so does everybody else watching this, right? And so part of the skill of well-being is the understanding or the recognition that each of us, every single one of us, comes into this world with a basic innate goodness. I'll repeat that. Each one of us, every one of the 7.1 something billion people on this planet, and everyone who will come before us and after us, and everyone who has ever come before us, every single person has come into this world. It's probably true of most animals too, but in fact all animals. But every single person came into this world and will come into this world, you included, with the same basic innate goodness. Now, they have ways of tracking this with infants, right? Like 6-month-old babies, right? Where they have very delicate instruments in the lab where they can track the eye movements of a baby and track where, in pupil dilation and tracking and stuff and see where the baby is drawn to, without the baby talking or moving or anything like that, right? And they do very basic experiments, right? Where they have a puppet that is kind and speaking in a happy voice and doing kind things and being happy, right? And then they have the other puppet that's mean and talking in a, kind of voice and taking things from the nice puppet and stuff like that. 100% of the time, not 99.999%, 100% of the time, at least as I understand it, the babies always gravitate towards the goodness. Always gravitate towards the kindness and the compassion and that's what we are. And so now, the thing that happens to a lot of us, though, is that we change over the time, right? Which is to say that we are shaped by our experiences. And how this applies to anger is very, very important, right? Because when I used to be very angry and really express my anger at other people, I would do so with the feeling in me and the sort of perception that there's something inherently wrong with this person, right? They're a bad seed. They are evil. They are bad. I don't know how many more ways I could say that. And the reality is, though, again, as I've just demonstrated, they are not inherently, in their core, they are not a bad person any more than I am a bad person. In fact, we both came into this world with an innate goodness. Like, we know that scientifically. So the reason why the behavior of that person is different from the behavior of me, perhaps, is not because of something inherently different about us or inherently separate about us, but it's really just a matter of the experiences that each of us have. Remembering that your mind, your nervous system, the literal circuits of your brain are shaped in every real way, are shaped by your experiences. There's a wonderful film that was made about Dr. Gabor Mate, and his work surrounding trauma. The film is called The Wisdom of Trauma, and I highly recommend seeing it. There's a woman in this film who works with prisoners, right? People who are incarcerated for violent crimes, and she works with these men and women to teach them that it's that they have been shaped by their adverse childhood experiences. ACE is something you can go online and take a test. Google ACE test. There's I think it's like either 10 or 6. I got a 6, which is very, very high. According to all statistics, I should be in jail right now. Right? I mean, I am an alcoholic. I am an angerholic. I am a workaholic. I mean, there's a lot of things that are, disruptive about me in my life that are a result of these adverse childhood experiences, namely trauma that came from abuse and neglect. And so with this brilliant woman who's in this brilliant film, she had this brilliant quote where she said, we have to start looking at each other not as what is wrong with others, but instead what has happened to others. Because again, we are all doing the same things here, right? When you wake up in the morning, and the same way as when I wake up in the morning, we have before us the same experiences. I mean, yes, there are subtle differences between all of it, but the point is that we all wake up with fears and with joys and with excitement and with dreams and with hopes and desires and goals in our lives. We all want to be happy. We all want to be free from suffering. We all want to be loved and accepted by those around us. That is not different about you and me, or any of the other hundreds of people who are watching this video right now. This is the same about us. This intrinsic drive that we have is the same, in fact, of all sentient beings on the entire planet. Every dog, cat, cow, fox, whale, dolphin, monkey, bear, every mammal on the planet is a sentient being, which is to say that they know when they are suffering and they desire to be free from suffering. They have a drive to be free from suffering. There's no difference in any of us in this respect. We are exactly the same in this respect. And so when we can cultivate this understanding as a means or as a matter of intentional awareness, explicit understanding, when we can do that, when we can start seeing each other as the same as each other, as opposed to different from each other, this is what opens us up to the empathy that ultimately will lead to the compassion that ultimately allows us to stay within our own regulation and manage our lives. That's what it is, right? And again, it doesn't mean that person's behavior, it does not disrupt me, right? If a person behaves in a way that is harmful to me, that's still real and that still needs to be dealt with and stuff. But it's how I decide to respond to that in my emotional experience changes vastly when I can see that action and that behavior of the other person as something that is coming from their own need to relieve their own suffering. Which is to say that everything everyone does 100% of the time is in the service of reducing their suffering or increasing their happiness. Which is to say that person who did that horrible thing to me years ago, or maybe even just this morning, who knows, right? I mean, nothing has happened to me recently, but people have done really horrible things to me, and I've done really horrible things to others, right? Through my anger and through my, angst that came from the anger and the reactivity that anger bred in me, right? But the thing is that even when somebody is doing a horrible thing, And even when they know they're doing something horrible, right? This is not to say that that the delusion, removes their sort of understanding of what they're doing. That's not the case either all the time. Sometimes it is, but not all the time. Sometimes somebody is very deliberately doing something with all their faculties of understanding, and they're doing something deliberately to hurt me. But even in that case, the driving force behind all that, even though it is very intentional and very conscious and very, on purpose, right? It still is driven by this need that that person has, which is the same need that I have, which is the basic need to relieve my suffering. Now, this person could be very wrong. They could be very mistaken that this action is not going to relieve their suffering. And that's their work to do, right? That's for them to, come to that understanding through their own inner work. And that's not my job to do that for them. Now, if it's a loved one, it's somebody I care about, or for me, a client, yes, that is a job that I can take on. But inherently, that's not my responsibility. That's their responsibility. My responsibility is to recognize that they are acting from this place of suffering. Again, even when it is very clear that they know exactly what they're doing and that there's no mistake involved here. In fact, you could say especially in those cases. And once I recognize that, and once I hold that recognition in my explicit awareness, that again allows me to stay out here from it, right? And it also allows me to forgive it, right? Because I recognize that even if, no matter how angry I want to get at this person, it's not going to change what's already happened, right? We know that. And in all likelihood, it's not going to change their behavior going forward either. I don't have that power over them. And you don't have that power over most of the people in your life either. You might have that influence over some people, those really close to you, your children, your spouse, your siblings, your cousins, that kind of thing. Even some friends, even some coworkers and stuff. Sure, there might be people who you can influence, but you have no way of controlling someone's behavior. That never is going to happen. Even in prison, we can't control people's behavior, right? All we do is control it to the extent that we're able to. And that's the ultimate form of control, right? So the message that I'm trying to give to you today is to recognize that as you're walking through life and all the different people that you're noticing in your moment-to-moment experience, just like you, every single one of them wants to be happy. They want to be free from suffering. They want to be accepted by others. They want to be safe. They want to be healthy. They want to be happy. They want to be loved, even if they don't realize it. That's what drives all of us. And in that sense, we are very much the same. Yes, there are certainly complex and subtle differences between all of us, right? And some of those differences are inherent, right? Like someone's skin color or hair color or curly hair versus straight hair or body shape or, handsome looks or whatever, right? Yes, those are going to be, differences that are biological differences, yes. But those are just superficial differences. They aren't really making us different. For instance, we know through very extensive science, we know that biologically there's little difference between a white person and a black person. That the concept of race is just a construct of our own doing. That aside from just melanin difference in our skin, we all have the same organs, we all have the same, cellular makeup, we all have the same genetic coding, that creates all of this, there is no difference between me and that person. That is the great delusion, that there's a separation between us. And when we can see through that and see past that delusion and recognize that you are just like me. When you lie your head on the pillow at night, you reflect back on things, and some things you reflect fearfully and regretfully and remorsefully. Some things you reflect proudly and excitedly and happily. You have worries about the future, just like I have worries about the future. You have dreams and aspirations, just like I have dreams and aspirations. There are times in your life where you have made mistakes, just like there are times in my life where I've made mistakes. You have had times where you've done amazing things for other people or yourself, and I have had times also where I have done amazing things for myself and other people. And that's what we are. As Ram Dass said very famously, we're all just walking each other home. And when we can start to, feel this, when we start to see this and have this in our emotional understanding, things like anger become completely different. And that's not to say that anger goes away, and that's not to say that anger should ever go away. Anger can be a very, very helpful thing. It's the most powerful emotion we have. There's nothing that can motivate a human being or even an animal like anger can. And so there are times where anger is appropriate, and you want anger. But even then, the anger is seen in a non-identified way. Right? Or a disidentified way, that it's not, I am not anger. I'm just experiencing anger as a reaction, as a reflection of my current moment-to-moment experience. My present moment experience is triggering this anger emotion in my body to drive me towards some kind of action. So it's not bad. I love my anger. But I love my anger partially because it no longer has that power over me. I'm able to hold my anger out here a little bit. I'm allowed I'm able to allow my anger to flourish in appropriate times and to dissipate in less appropriate times. I have the skillful control over it at this point. And that's the trick. And again, that trick, the first step in that trick is to recognize that this person who is, to whom I'm directing my anger, they're not different from me. They are the same as me. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to know some simple practices you can do about this, to cultivate this sense of sameness as opposed to difference, hit me up. Let me send you some instructions, all right? Or perhaps we could even jump on a call and I could tell you face to face. All right, everybody. Thanks again for watching. Thank you for listening. I wish you well, and I'll be back in a couple of days.